May 15th, 1918. Argonne Forest, France. 2 a.m. Corporal Henry Johnson hears the sound that means death is coming. The distinctive snick of wire cutters on the perimeter fence. German raiders, close, maybe a dozen, coming through the darkness toward his outpost. Johnson throws a grenade toward the sound and shouts to Private Needham Roberts, "Run back to camp! Get the French!" They're part of the 369th Infantry Regiment, an all-black unit attached to the French army because white American soldiers refused to serve alongside them in trenches. Roberts starts running, but German grenades explode across the outpost. Shrapnel tears into Roberts, dropping him. Johnson drags him to the trench, where Roberts hands up grenades while Johnson throws them at the advancing Germans. But there are too many. They're coming from every direction. Johnson runs out of grenades, then bullets. The Germans swarm the position. Johnson swings his rifle like a club until the stock shatters. A German soldier hits him in the head with a rifle butt, sending him sprawling. Dazed, Johnson watches Germans grab Roberts and start dragging him away, taking him prisoner. Johnson reaches for the only weapon he has left, his bolo knife. He charges into the darkness, blade slashing. Germans fire at him, but can't get clean shots in the chaos. Johnson is stabbed, shot in the arm. A German jumps on his back. Johnson reaches behind, grabs the man, and stabs him repeatedly until he falls. He keeps fighting, keeps slashing, keeps moving. 21 wounds, bullet holes, stab wounds, shrapnel. But he won't go down. He drags Roberts back to safety while Germans retreat at the sound of French reinforcements approaching. Dawn reveals 4 dead Germans, 10 to 20 more wounded and bleeding their way back to German lines. The position held, Roberts saved, the French line unbroken. And Henry Johnson, a former railroad porter from Albany, New York, standing in the trench covered in blood, his and theirs, with a knife in his hand and 21 wounds in his body. Subscribe to see how the soldier who became known as Black Death fought off a German raid with just a knife and wasn't awarded the Medal of Honor for 97 years. And leave a comment with where you're watching from. The French immediately recognized Johnson's courage. They awarded him the Croix de Guerre with gold palm, France's highest military honor, within 24 hours. He became the first American soldier to receive the decoration in World War I. The American military did nothing. No medal, no recognition, no disability benefits despite wounds that would cripple him for life. Johnson returned home to a segregated America that celebrated him briefly, then discarded him. He died broke and forgotten at age 32. He was buried in Arlington National Cemetery, but under the wrong name. His story was lost for decades. In 1996, 77 years after his death, President Clinton awarded Johnson the Purple Heart. In 2015, 97 years after the battle, President Obama finally awarded him the Medal of Honor. This is the story of Henry Johnson and the Harlem Hellfighters, the black soldiers who fought for a country that denied them citizenship, the unit that spent 191 days on the front lines, longer than any other American unit, and came home to Jim Crow laws and systematic discrimination. The men who proved their courage against Germans who called them Hollenkämpfer, hell fighters, while serving an army that treated them as inferior. Henry Johnson was born July 15, 1892, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. As a teenager, he moved to New York, seeking better opportunities than the Jim Crow South offered. He worked as a chauffeur, soda mixer, coal yard laborer, and finally as a redcap porter at Albany's Union Station. On June 5, 1917, 2 months after America entered World War I, Johnson enlisted in the U.S. Army. He was assigned to Company C, 15th New York Infantry Regiment, a National Guard unit formed in 1916 consisting of black enlisted soldiers with both black and white officers. The unit was federalized in 1917, shipped to France in December, and redesignated as the 369th Infantry Regiment, part of the segregated 93rd Infantry Division. The 93rd was assigned almost exclusively to non-combat roles: unloading supplies, digging latrines, stevedore work. Labor, not combat. White American soldiers refused to serve in trenches alongside black troops. General John Pershing, commanding the American Expeditionary Forces, wanted to keep American units together but segregated. However, some units from the 93rd were detached to serve with the French Army, whose ranks already included black soldiers from France's colonial empire. The 369th was attached to the French 161st Division on April 8, 1918. The French issued them French helmets and rifles, taught them enough French to understand orders, and sent them to the front near the Argonne Forest. The white French soldiers mostly treated them better than their white American counterparts had. The decision to serve was complicated for black Americans. Some black leaders questioned why African Americans should sacrifice for a nation denying them full citizenship. W.E.B. Du Bois argued differently. While the war lasts, we should forget our special grievances and close our ranks shoulder to shoulder with our white fellow citizens. About 380,000 African Americans served in the Army during World War I. Of these, 200,000 were sent overseas, mostly in support roles. Approximately 42,000 saw combat. Among themselves, the soldiers of the 369th called themselves the Black Rattlers, with a coiled rattlesnake on their unit crest. The French soldiers called them Hommes de Bronze, men of bronze. By the time they paraded through New York in 1919, they were famous as the Harlem Hellfighters. But it was the Germans who gave them their most fearsome name, Hollenkämpfer, Hellfighters. A captured Prussian officer reportedly said the Hellfighters were devils who smile while they kill and won't be taken alive. The U.S. Army officially recognized this name for the unit in 2020, 102 years after the war ended. The 369th deployed to combat positions in May 1918 with minimal training and no combat experience. Johnson and Roberts were assigned to forward outposts, the most dangerous positions, where German raiding parties probed for weaknesses in Allied lines. On the night of May 14th to 15th, they took the midnight to 4 shift at an isolated outpost. German snipers had fired at them earlier. They lined up grenades, expecting trouble. At 2 a.m., trouble arrived. The German raid on Johnson's outpost wasn't random. German forces conducted regular night raids to capture prisoners for interrogation, test defenses, and demoralize Allied troops. They targeted isolated outposts with overwhelming force, typically a dozen or more soldiers against 2 or 3 defenders. Johnson and Roberts represented what Germans considered easy targets, inexperienced black soldiers with minimal training. The raid was supposed to be quick, kill or capture the defenders, gather intelligence, withdraw before reinforcements arrived. But Henry Johnson didn't cooperate. After Roberts was wounded by grenade shrapnel, Johnson dragged him to cover where Roberts could hand up grenades. Johnson threw them at advancing Germans, buying time. But the Germans kept coming from multiple directions, a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm defenders. When grenades ran out, Johnson fired his rifle until ammunition was gone. He swung the empty rifle like a club until the stock shattered. A German soldier hit him in the head with a rifle butt, knocking him down. Dazed and bleeding, Johnson watched Germans grab Roberts and start dragging him toward German lines. Johnson later recalled his thinking. Each slash meant something, believe me. I wasn't doing exercises, let me tell you. He drew his bolo knife, a short, heavy blade designed for clearing vegetation, and charged. In close quarters darkness, the knife was more effective than rifles. Germans couldn't shoot without hitting each other. Johnson slashed and stabbed, moving constantly, using chaos as protection. He was shot in the arm, stabbed multiple times. A German jumped on his back. Johnson reached behind, grabbed the man, and stabbed him repeatedly until he fell. He kept fighting, 21 wounds accumulating on his body, but still moving, still attacking. Johnson dragged Roberts back while Germans retreated at the sound of French reinforcements approaching. The entire fight lasted perhaps 15 minutes, but in that time, Johnson had single-handedly repelled a force 6 times his size, killed 4 Germans, wounded 10 to 20 more, and saved his wounded comrade. Morning light revealed the carnage. German blood trails led back toward their lines. Bodies lay in the wire. The outpost, which Germans expected to overrun in minutes, had held because one man refused to quit. The French 16th Division recognized Johnson and Roberts immediately. On May 16th, one day after the battle, both received the Croix de Guerre, France's highest military honor. Johnson's medal included the coveted gold palm for extraordinary valor. They were the first American soldiers to receive this distinction. The French citation stated Henry Johnson gave a magnificent example of courage and energy. Johnson's response was characteristically modest. There wasn't anything so fine about it. Just fought for my life. A rabbit would have done that. But rabbits don't charge into German raiders with knives. Johnson became known as Black Death, the soldier Germans feared encountering in darkness. The 369th proved themselves repeatedly through the rest of the war. They spent 191 days on the front lines, possibly more than any other American unit. They suffered 1,500 casualties with only 900 replacements, meaning many soldiers fought the entire war without relief. The constant combat and lack of rotation left them exhausted by November 1918. The French decorated the entire unit with the Croix de Guerre with Silver Star for service during the Meuse-Argonne campaign. The 369th was cited for bravery 11 times for unit actions. Individual soldiers received 171 decorations for heroism. Former President Theodore Roosevelt called Johnson one of the 5 bravest Americans to serve in World War I. The Army used Johnson's image to recruit new soldiers and sell victory war stamps. Henry Johnson licked a dozen Germans. How many stamps have you licked? Johnson and Roberts returned home as national heroes. Promoted to sergeant, Johnson led the 369th in their February 1919 parade through New York City. The unit had been denied the honor of marching with the Rainbow Division before deployment. The division commander told Colonel William Haywood that black is not a color in the rainbow. Now they marched through Harlem to massive crowds celebrating their return. For a brief moment, America recognized the Harlem Hellfighters' service and sacrifice. The recognition didn't last. The America the Hellfighters returned to was the same America they'd left. Jim Crow laws, segregation, systematic denial of equal rights to black Americans. They'd fought for democracy abroad. They came home to second-class citizenship. Johnson's fame was fleeting. He participated in a series of paid lectures about the war, speaking about racial harmony in the trenches. But one evening in St. Louis, Johnson went off script. He spoke the truth. White soldiers refused to share trenches with black troops. He described the discrimination and abuse black soldiers endured. He was shunted aside after that, according to National Guard records. No more speaking engagements. A warrant was reportedly issued for his arrest for wearing his uniform beyond the prescribed date. Though publicly praised by press and army, Johnson's discharge papers didn't mention his debilitating injuries. No disability allowance, no medical benefits. The 21 wounds that would cripple him for life were officially unacknowledged. Johnson didn't receive a Purple Heart, but that wasn't unusual. The Purple Heart had been established by George Washington in 1782, but only awarded to 3 Revolutionary War soldiers. Though never officially discontinued, it wasn't revived until 1932. General Douglas MacArthur received the first modern Purple Heart in February 1932. With no other options, Johnson returned to his job as a porter at Albany's train station. His shattered left foot had been reconstructed with a metal plate. He couldn't stand for long shifts. His lack of education and physical limitations made steady employment impossible. Unable to support his family, his marriage collapsed. Johnson died alone and penniless on July 1st, 1929, in New Lenox, Illinois. He was 32 years old. The cause? Myocarditis following tuberculosis. One of America's greatest war heroes died forgotten 13 years after the battle that should have made him a legend. For decades, it was assumed Johnson was buried in a pauper's grave. His story faded from memory. The Harlem Hellfighters were largely forgotten. One more uncomfortable truth about how America treated black soldiers who'd fought for freedom abroad while denied it at home. In the 1990s, researchers re-examining World War I military records of African Americans uncovered Johnson's story. In 1996, 67 years after his death, President Bill Clinton posthumously awarded Johnson the Purple Heart. In 2001, historians from the New York Division of Military and Naval Affairs discovered that William Henry Johnson, his full legal name, had been buried in Arlington National Cemetery, Section 25, Site 64. He'd been there all along, but under a name researchers hadn't known to search. After this discovery, the Army awarded Johnson the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second highest military decoration. But supporters pushed for the Medal of Honor. The obstacle was documentation. Army records from Johnson's service were incomplete. The search continued until researchers found the crucial evidence: a memo written by General John Pershing confirming Johnson was an American soldier, despite wearing French uniform and serving under French command. Pershing wrote that Johnson's unit, first attacked, continued fighting after receiving wounds and despite use of grenades by superior force, and should be given credit for preventing by their bravery the taking prisoner of our men. On June 2, 2015, 97 years after the battle, President Barack Obama posthumously awarded Henry Johnson the Medal of Honor at a White House ceremony. Obama said, "The least we can do is to say, 'We know who you are, we know what you did for us.' We are forever grateful." Johnson's Medal of Honor citation reads, in part, "Private Johnson's extraordinary heroism and selflessness above and beyond the call of duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect great credit upon himself, Company C, 369th Infantry Regiment, 93rd Infantry Division, and the United States Army." In June 2023, the U.S. Army renamed Fort Polk in Louisiana as Fort Johnson, finally honoring the soldier who'd been forgotten for nearly a century. The story of Henry Johnson and the Harlem Hellfighters reveals uncomfortable truths about American history. Black soldiers fought for a country that denied them basic rights. They proved their courage repeatedly while serving an army that treated them as inferior. They came home as heroes and were forgotten within years. Johnson killed 4 Germans and wounded 20 more with just a knife while suffering 21 wounds. He saved his comrade and held the French line. France recognized his heroism immediately. America took 97 years. That delay wasn't bureaucratic oversight. It was systematic erasure of black military service and sacrifice. Johnson's story disappeared because America wasn't ready to acknowledge that black soldiers were heroes equal to any white troops. The belated recognition is welcome, but it can't erase the decades Johnson spent crippled and impoverished, unable to work, abandoned by the country he'd served. It can't restore his marriage or give him the life he deserved. It can't let him hear the recognition while he was alive. What it can do is ensure his story isn't forgotten again. Henry Johnson fought with a knife against a dozen Germans and won. He earned the name Black Death from enemies who feared him. He proved that courage, honor, and sacrifice aren't determined by race. They're determined by character. And he deserved better than dying broke at 32, forgotten by everyone except the Germans who'd faced him in darkness and learned what Black Death meant.